Okay, so we are good to go.
Okay.
So the first question, um, it says, discuss as a grade what, or as a group, what grade you would give Morgan for how he pursued Skyhook and why.
Hmm. I don't know. Maybe a B.
Yeah, I don't know that I would give him like an A for it, but yeah, I mean, definitely his fortitude and stick to itiveness definitely served him well. But I think he kind of just jumped into it prematurely as well. So he didn't do as much research and as much background checking as he should have done to
Mm-hmm.
allow them to really reach success right off the bat. They just kind of jumped into it and just flew by the seat of their pants and had an idea, and they were going to figure out how to make it work. And so for that, he definitely he didn't plan or do the things that I think are required. Um, but I think he definitely had fortitude to stick with it and push through the difficult times, which really is what any entrepreneur has to do. There's going to be those difficult times that you have to push through, and you have to find a way to make it work. Um, and I think that he definitely gets a strong grade in that category.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. That's why I thought a B because um, he really did give it his all with, the troubled times. Like he was taking out a second mortgage, maxing out credit cards, putting himself not in a great financial standpoint for the good of his company. He even said in the
Yeah,
case study that like social workers came and knocked on his house and said like, does your kids have adequate food and heating and stuff to make sure they were okay because they saw his like financial situation. Um,
yeah,
so he was doing everything that way that he could to nurture the company. But yeah, I agree. Research would have been better. That way he would have been able to see how. I feel like he was. I got the impression that he was kind of caught off guard and didn't plan for how um, involved the company was going to be with having to map like the whole U.S. and how often they have to map it and how much that would actually cost and work that went into it. And so I think if he put more research into it, he might have been able to plan for that better or execute it better.
yeah. I completely agree. And coming from a standpoint where I have a family and um, I have my son, like I don't know that I could just quit my job and just put everything into it like he did. And
Yeah.
um, especially with having four kids, trying to support four kids and basically living off of savings and hoping that everything would work out, and then mortgaging your house and
Yeah.
really putting your family at risk like that. I don't know that I could have done that.
Yeah, I don't think I could have done it either.
So let's see. So the next question is, Skyhook developed a pretty cool technology that has gotten lots of positive feedback. Put yourself in the shoes of Ted Morgan. Why the lack of sales?
Well, he received like awards and stuff for uh, like the most. I forgot what that award was. Most innovative award or something. But
Yeah,
he's having a hard time selling his product, which is why the lack of sales. And I think also because everybody uses the GPS and everyone's already comfortable with that, and isn't his Wi-Fi based? It's different than GPS, right?
yeah. And so and it definitely does provide some better benefits than GPS. Like it does work indoors. It works in populated downtown areas. So when I first moved here to Denver, I worked as a delivery driver for a snack company, and we had all of the convenience stores that are in the big buildings downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to drive downtown and deliver to them every Friday was the day that I made deliveries to downtown, and so um, but for me, not knowing the area, it was scary because I would drive downtown and then all of a sudden the GPS would start working or would stop working. And so I didn't know where I was at. I didn't know because the buildings blocked the signal. So I can definitely see the value of the product in that regard, that it uses Wi-Fi instead of using GPS, because sometimes in highly dense areas where they have tall buildings and things like that, you don't always get GPS signal. And so I think that definitely is a benefit.
Yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, I think it was hard just to motivate people to replace the GPS with this, though. And
yeah,
since it has to be, well, it should be like integrated with like cell phones or in devices, and so he really has to sell to like manufacturers, you know.
Yeah. And so, and with this, I mean, I think about it too. And GPS really had more of a proven track record too, because it was government developed. And so there were 30 years of research and development that had gone into perfecting it. And that's what people knew, and that's what they were used to. And it said that that's what a lot of the apps were already built on. And so they found out that people weren't like willing to reprogram their apps to work with GPS. And so he had to basically change his to where it would read out as GPS coordinates so that it would still work with the other applications without other people having to rewrite their code. So I think that that definitely made a difference. But it's a proven technology, GPS is, and I think trying to get past that and really make people see the added benefit really was a difficult thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. So we're cruising through this pretty quick. So the next question is, review the deals below and describe the proposed deal outcome and lessons learned. So it was MSFT. Do you remember what that one was?
That's Microsoft, isn't it?
Oh yes, that is Microsoft. So the Microsoft deal.
The Microsoft deal, they went there and they mapped out the area so it would run flawlessly during the presentation, and then they liked it a lot, and so then they agreed to the proposal, which was like a tentative type of deal, for the upfront fee of $300,000, and then an additional fee for every copy of the app that shipped with Skyhook's technology. But then after the deal was like tentatively accepted or whatever, Microsoft started like ignoring their calls, and then sent back a message that said that they, were pretty much only interested if they got it for one-time payment of $100,000, no fees. So then that deal fell through.
Yeah. So yeah, as you were saying, it was, and that one was kind of interesting because he had put in a lot of time and a lot of effort, and had done multiple meetings and had allowed them to use demo software and had done a lot of that. And he had been banking on the fact that that one would come through, and he had based a lot of his, was it Series A or Series B at that time, off of the fact that it would come through. And so a lot of his investors were expecting it to come through, and that didn't happen. They still invested because they still believed in the product, but it was really kind of a difficult hinge point for them, I believe, and having that kind of disappointment, and after you thought for sure this was going to happen, it would be hard. So what lessons do you think he learned from it?
Well, probably not to get his hopes up until the deal is final, for that, but maybe, I don't know, I would think he would learn not to advertise deals like that to investors until it was final, because that validates his company really well. But then the potential investors could think, well, why didn't Microsoft want to do it, and what am I missing, and kind of because of it.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to negotiations too. I don't know that he really was well versed at negotiations at that point. And so I think that's why it broke down, is because he really didn't have the skills to negotiate. It didn't say that in the case, but I'm guessing it probably came down to that. He didn't know how to handle a big company like that. And it shows later on it with Nokia as well, that they just kept bouncing him around from department to department, and he's had over 60 meetings with Nokia. And so, I mean,
surprised to see that.
so I mean, I don't know that he necessarily learned that lesson from Microsoft, but it did. I think all of these combined did help him to learn that.
Yeah.
And then the next one was the E911, which was part of Vonage. And so with Vonage, they were trying to use that technology to create the E911 using the Wi-Fi signal so that it would let the emergency personnel know specific location, because it doesn't have GPS. And so they were looking for a way to be able to use location services with the voice over IP phones to dispatch 911, or for 911 dispatchers to dispatch emergency personnel and get them to the correct homes. And so I think with that one, like, the technology fit really well with Vonage and the E911. But I think with that one as well, it ended up falling through because it became less of a priority, which I'm not exactly sure why that happened. But I think it really comes down to the fact that, again, not to get your hopes up and not to put too much into something that you don't know if it's going to really succeed or not.
Yeah, not count the chicks before they hatch.
Yep. All right, and then the final one was Nokia, which we already kind of talked about, and that one ended up falling through because there was really no way to know. They didn't know which department was going to be in charge of paying for it, or how they were going to implement it, or anything like that. Bought another service, wasn't it Nokia that had just paid for the GPS company, or was that a different one?
Yeah, no, I think that was Nokia, and so then they weren't super excited about switching, super motivated to.
Yeah. And so, and again with that one, it really comes down to negotiation and understanding. So one of the things, and that's the class you're doing next semester, is the new business creation.
Launching a business venture.
Yeah, that's the one. And it centers around the business model canvas. And one part of that is talking to people within the organization before you even approach them to purchase a product or to pitch a product. You talk to them and understand the organizational structure, and understand who's going to be in charge of making the purchasing decisions for that product, so that you can come directly in and talk to those people, get the decision made, and be done, rather than being bounced around from department to department, just like happened in the Nokia case. So I think that did teach him that you have to know and understand the organizational structure of the organization you're trying to sell to, so that you don't waste your time, and don't have to go through all the headaches just to have nothing materialize.
Yeah, that's a good point. They should have followed that so they didn't have to do 60 meetings.
Yep. And so I'm thinking that's probably a lesson that he learned from that.
Yeah.
So the next question is, who benefits from this technology? What problem does it solve, and who has this problem? And then, do the business decision makers in the companies above feel the pain that this solution solves?
Well, the first question, who benefits from the technology? I think everybody would, because it's a mapping, it's like a GPS, like Google Maps or whatever. And so if you, like what you mentioned before, your experience when you got down with the big buildings, your GPS failed, and so then you weren't sure where you're going, and so you would have benefited from this technology.
Yeah, and so I think really what it comes down to is it's the end consumer that's going to, especially with the bigger companies like this, it's going to be their end consumer is the one that benefits. And so I think that kind of ties with the last question that no, they really don't feel the pain of it, because they're not the ones using the product so much as their end consumers and those that on a daily basis are dealing with the issues of losing GPS signal and not being able to keep up with all of that, and the applications and stuff that come from it. Really, it's not them that feels the pain. It's the end user and the developers of the applications and things like that that are the ones that feel the pain. And so so I think that that's probably part of it, is that they targeted the wrong customer segment, and went after big corporations trying to get them to tie the product into their phone to differentiate their product. But really, they don't see it as adding enough benefit.
Yeah. I agree. Especially since most of them already have their applications made, and yeah, it's probably for the code that they didn't work.
And then, so the next one is vote on which strategy or options do you favor? Local ads, sell the company to another company, or persevere. And so with me, really, it was down to two. So based on the information in the case, it said that his whole goal was to be an entrepreneur and to own his own company. And so to sell the company goes against what his original mission and original goal was. And all the hard work he's put into it, I don't know that he's quite ready to just sell the company yet. So for me, that one was off the table. So it was down between local ads and perseverance. And I ended up settling on perseverance, just because they're going, like, they really do have a good direction. And if they're able to strike a deal with Apple, and maybe use it as they pay Apple to reach the end consumer and then subscribe the end consumer or something like that, they may be able to find a way to really monetize what they've created. And so I think they're right on the verge of really being able to start making money with this, and to give up that soon and that early, just as they're building that momentum, I think just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So that's why I ended up choosing the perseverance.
Yeah, that's a good point. I actually chose sell the company.
Okay.
Yeah, I chose that one because, which I was sad to choose that one because they did work really hard making the company go this far. But how I saw it is they're like as far into debt as they can get. I doubt he can get any more credit cards. So I don't know how much further they can go with the company on themselves. And also with both the local ads and the persevere option, they had to cut down on making them ads and keeping those updated. And according to my calculations, that was like millions of dollars that they spent on hiring those drivers and mapped everything over those 18 months. And so all that work would have been lost. Yeah, with the local ads, they're going in a new direction, and with the perseverance, they have to cut a lot of costs and kind of just get down to the bare essentials. And so it said that was one of the things that was going to get. So I just thought that they spent all this money and did all this work getting to the business to this point that they shouldn't really fall back to that point. And so then if they just sell it, then they can start a different business and grow it over, and then this business with someone else.
Yeah, and that makes a great point. But they also have that deal, the meeting with Apple on the table, which could turn into something. And if they're able to strike a deal with Apple, that would possibly give them everything they need to be able to keep going. So
yeah, no,
I don't know.
agree. If they got that Apple deal, then they should keep going.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know that they should to sell the company until they know what comes of the Apple deal. And so that's kind of where I came from. But everything you said makes complete sense. And so I think really, in my opinion, the best option at this point would be to see how the Apple deal works out. And then if nothing really comes of it, then really the only option to keep the company going and to really allow the company to realize its full potential would be to sell to another company that could supply the capital and the resources to make it successful.
Yeah, that's what I thought. But yeah, I agree that they should see how the Apple deal turns out first. But yeah, because that could be, a great opportunity and exactly what they've been waiting for.
Yeah, so I think we've kind of decided on kind of like a hybrid of the two.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, and then okay, so it's discuss and convince everybody why yours is correct, which we already went through that. So so as a group, prepare an agenda for your call with Steve Jobs. So what is your BATNA, which is best alternative to a negotiated agreement? So what would you say is our best alternative to a negotiated agreement?
Like if they weren't able to negotiate on something?
So basically what that means is what would you be willing to settle for? If you're not able to get the terms that you wanted, what would you be willing to settle for? So I think obviously the best option for them would be to basically license the product or their product to Apple to use. Those are for tomorrow. So for them to use in their phones to provide that feature to their customers. So that obviously would be what they should shoot for, kind of like what they were doing with Microsoft, where it would be the $300,000 and then 35 cents per phone that ships or whatever it is that has the technology in it. And that obviously would be the best. But that obviously Steve Jobs is a very hard negotiator. And so I don't think that that's really going to end up being the final negotiated agreement. And so I think if they were willing to negotiate it to a point where he could make sure he monetizes, so even something like that, I don't know, that he either doesn't have to pay or they split profits of the amount of people that actually use the product. I think something like that would be the best alternative. That way it's not cash out of their pocket that they're having to pay to Apple to get people on board, but that they're able to like maybe share the profits of it and do something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I didn't want them to give up the per device revenue, that was coming in like what Microsoft wanted. They just wanted it for $100,000 and then do as many devices and stuff that they want with it. And so, but yeah, I think that's a good point to have it to actually how many people are using it instead of every phone that ships.
Yeah, and I think that really would work well in this situation. So.
And it seems reasonable, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems reasonable.
And then so it says what's Jobs' interests? So I think what it's asking for is what is Steve Jobs interested in, and really the one thing that it points out and that I've learned from the studying I've done on Steve Jobs and everything is just his attention to detail and just how strict he is on not being willing to compromise. He isn't willing to compromise. He is very strict and very difficult to negotiate with, because he wants things the way he wants them, and he's not willing to compromise on technology. He's not willing to compromise on quality, and that's what's made Apple what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read that, like, especially on quality, he's not willing to sacrifice.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people that worked with Steve Jobs that said he was the most difficult person to work for, just because he was relentless. He would not give in on anything, and it was his way or the highway. And so that makes negotiating a little tough.
Yeah, which is like, that got him to where he is today. But
Yeah.
I got that.
So the next question is, why did Steve Jobs call you?
He called. Well, it said to like express his interest. But what I got from this thing is that Ted Morgan didn't even know exactly what kind of arrangement he had in mind. If he wants to like buy the software or get paid for granting access to Apple it didn't really specify that.
Yeah. And it really didn't give much detail on that at all, other than he was interested in the technology. And as I read that, so I have an iPhone, which really, I think, other than really cell phone, or really other than laptops and iPads and everything else, cell phone would be a perfect use for this product. But from being an Apple user, the first thing that popped into my mind when I read that was Find My iPhone or Find My iPad, which uses Wi-Fi location to allow you to find your device wherever it was left last. So that's the first thing I thought of, is that's like now it uses more GPS location, but early on it was Wi-Fi based. So it was based on your Wi-Fi positioning. And so that's the first thing that popped into my mind when I read that was, oh, this is the foundation of the Find My iPhone app. And so it's kind of interesting to see that part of it and see that technology very well could have been used in that app that exists today.
Yeah, that's cool. I used to have an iPhone, but recently went to the Samsung. But yeah, that's cool. I didn't know that ran on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it originally did. It now uses GPS, and it'll record your like last GPS location. But on a lot of the devices it runs on, like the iPads without GPS location, then it runs off Wi-Fi. So, and then the next question is, who should pay? Will you pay Apple to get their device, or to get onto their device, or will Apple pay you? How much will you propose and support your answer? So I think this kind of goes back to what we were talking about. That it's really, I don't know that, I think they could do, like, obviously we would want Apple to pay us to have our technology on the device, but I think really ultimately, I think a fair negotiation would be to split the profits, and then that way there's really not anybody paying. It just becomes then a partnership rather than a customer-client relationship.
Yeah, I agree. That seems like the best way. Because, like, when I first read that, I'm like, well, of course Apple should pay us, but but yeah, they are getting access to all of the Apple customers, if it's in the device. So yeah, I agree. The split partnership, I think, is the best compromise.
And then it says, how big is this opportunity? And I didn't run the numbers on it, but I do remember from the case it said the amount of millions of laptops, and then I think it was like 100 million cell phones or something like that that are in operation that could technically use this technology that are Apple devices. And so really, if you think about that, this is a huge opportunity for them to get their technology out there and to really prove just how well it works, and to get other companies on board. So I mean, even if they have to pay Apple to be able to get their technology on the devices, it will prove the technology, and then basically we know everything that Apple does, the other companies end up following more than likely, just because of the trend setting that Apple does. So this is a huge opportunity for Skyhook, and it could potentially break their company wide open.
Yeah, that's what I saw in the case is that the other companies have been reluctant to commit, but they've been interested. And so if Apple were to commit, then they would be more willing to commit as well. And also that it could help provide the capital needed to, map the world with the Wi-Fi access points.
Yep. All right, so I think that's really it. So I guess I'll do the summary and see if it sticks this time. But in summary, after our discussion, we decided that the best option, we both were split at the beginning. Andrea thought that it would be best for them to sell, and then I thought it would be best for them to persevere. But after our discussion, we decided that the best bet would be to hold off and persevere a little bit longer, and see what materializes from the Apple deal. And if that ends up falling through, then their best interest would be to sell the company to a company with greater assets, that would be able to provide greater resources, to be able to help the company reach its full potential and to allow the technology that had been developed to actually make it into mainstream use. And if they aren't able to strike a deal with Apple, they can't do that on their own at this point, because they would have to cut back so much on everything just to stay alive, and so their network would deteriorate because of that. And so really their best option is going to be to sell if they can't strike a deal with Apple. And then if they are able to work out a deal with Apple, we both think that the best option would be to possibly go into like a partnership. So it would be like a shared profit, rather than one party paying the other. They would just be able to share profits from the use of the technology. And that would possibly allow for entry into a bigger market, because a lot of people follow what Apple does. And so that would really allow them to potentially reach great success.
I agree. Well said.
Alrighty, so I'll go ahead and stop the broadcast.